Decentralized Trust. Haha, thanks, Rye. I already forgot. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust Besu meeting. It is March 18th. This is our regular contributor call. You are being recorded, transcribed, and machine summarized. I'd like to also draw your attention to our antitrust notice, the text of which is available in our wiki. Remind folks to please mute unless you're speaking, and if you have any questions, feel free to use the raise hand feature. Today we have a good amount of stuff here on the agenda. I want to start off with a couple of points from Matthew Whitehead from Kaleido. Looks like you and Banu have about 4 points in the agenda. So if you are ready, feel free to take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Justin. There's quite a lot we just wanted to go over with the community. It doesn't have to take a huge amount of time, doesn't need a lot of discussion, just to bring people up to speed with some bits and pieces. The first couple I was going to cover, and then I think probably maybe I'll introduce the next couple, and Banu has got, I think, some stuff to talk about. So I guess modularity is the first one. I'm going to hit this. Apologies. So firstly, can you see that full screen? It's probably a bit bigger if I do it full screen, Justin.
That looks great.
Yeah. And apologies, I keep getting pop-ups top right of my screen in Zoom. I can't turn them off, so sorry.
Cannot see them if you are.
Okay,
Oh,
good. Yeah,
there's
you might see them. Some people see them, some people seem not to. So there's been a lot of talk about modularity in Besu and how we can make the code base more streamlined, how we can make development more rapid without necessarily all of the existing historic code or code that's unrelated to changes needing to be tested and whatnot. I had a quick chat with Justin about this, and we at Kaleido want to kind of contribute to this, partly so that we can iterate on enterprise features quicker, and so that the community can iterate on the core EVM function quicker, and hopefully de-risk stuff. There's less code in places it doesn't need to be. It reduces CV chances and things. So I tried to draw what I thought we might try and tackle at Kaleido in the first instance, which was all about BFT. And this is what I drew, and I sent a copy of this to Justin. It's actually on the wiki as well, under the modularity section of the wiki. And this is what we thought we would do as a first kind of set of steps towards moving some of the existing enterprise function out of the core Besu repo, out of the core code base, and make it possible. So firstly, maybe we'll move it into a plugin that's in the current repo, but in the plugin section of the repo. And then that makes it really quick and easy, hopefully, to decide where we want to host it. Do we want to put it in its own repo? And also, as part of that, do we want to refactor it to use the engine API as its way of telling Besu, here's a block to propose, or give me a block to validate, and I'll do that. So this is a thing that we are kind of actively starting on. I've put some discussion in the Besu modularity channel on Discord. In the end, having looked at it initially and had a couple of chats, Jason had some good comments on how we might approach this. This variant of that slide is really where I'm starting, which is BFT itself is made up of various bits and pieces. There's the block building and validation side of things, which is all related to the engine API. And maybe that's a kind of a big, scary thing to bite off initially. But it's also, there's configuration of BFT. How do we make sure that you can continue to use BFT features and your configuration continues to work? Things like transitions and handling transitions of validators in different ways, and JSON RPC for all the QBFT JSON RPC methods. So what I thought I would do to tackle this in chunks was to say, right, how ready is the Besu plugin API, plugin architecture, for us to start doing this picture? why don't I just grab the JSON RPC function for KeyBFT, well, for all of the BFT really, and see if I can move that into a plugin where wherever that's hosted, we can then still build a version of Besu which pulls in all the core with some BFT. The BFT plugin, which initially will just provide JSON RPC implementations, give that to users, see if they notice, and hopefully, for the most part, that they won't, although there are probably some caveats to that. But use that as a way of starting the process. And then if that process is something we're happy with, that if that approach works, then we can effectively just keep dropping new function into the plugin as we pull it out of the core code base. And part of that ultimately will end up with block building and validation being done via the engine API. That's pretty much all I had to say on the subject. Like I say, these slides are in. It's just these slides. They're in the modularity wiki. Any kind of thoughts or comments or concerns about us and cracking on in this direction? I've raised a couple of draft PRs just to dip my toe in the water here. But any thoughts anyone has?
None of this is really surprising to me. This all looks good and looks aligned with what we're working on. I do think Jason is the right person to talk to on this. He is working on a form of staked QBFT that will be running over the engine API.
Mhm.
So I think that makes a ton of sense.
Good. That's a really good start. I did have a look at the linear QBFT bits and pieces that are going on with use of the engine API, and I think where I landed on that was I think it'll act as a good resource and reference for what we do. Whether or not it ends up with us using code from there or not, I don't know. But um, uh, yeah, that will probably come in like the next part of this BFD modularity when we get to actually the block building and validation side of things.
Sounds good.
Um, and I guess Rye, I guess people like you will probably be interested in some of the repo management. We might end up with a new repo that hosts some enterprise oriented features as plugins and all of the stuff that goes with that, I think. But I think that's after we've first proven out the kind of bottom left picture, then maybe we can have some discussions about that.
Sure. And that would be, over in the new Besu ETH org. I would
Yeah.
hope. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that would be the plan. And whether or not the right-hand side of this picture pulls in the left-hand side and creates a release, or the left-hand side pulls in the right-hand side and creates a different type of release that's the enterprise kind of variant of Besu alongside the more core public-oriented side of Besu. I think that's all stuff we can discuss a bit down the line.
Yep. Just let me know what you want.
Excellent, thank you. So I think, Justin, that's pretty much everything on that for now.
Yeah.
You happy for me to go straight on to some of the state-proof stuff?
Yeah, go nuts.
Cool. So I also have slides here, but I have loads of slides here, partly just to document some stuff, and partly because I think different people are interested in different sides of this. I thought what I would do is just for this audience, go in a little lower level in terms of how archive state proofs have been implemented. And a lot of this is kudos to Gary and Karim, who came up with some of the original ideas about how to do archive state with Bonsai using this concept of a flat DB. And we're about ready to merge the version that doesn't have state proofs, which has kind of proven a lot of this out. What I've implemented and I'm running, and I can show a very quick demo of at least a public synced node using this, is taking that idea and creating state proofs with it. So I'm not super sure where I want to talk about, but ultimately I think if I start here and just compare forest and bonsai, so if these little rectangle, if this front rectangle here is like just a node of the state tree, one node of the state tree, then as the nodes change, kind of semantically as they change over time, new nodes replace old ones, or new nodes get created in Forest, or new nodes replaced old ones in Bonsai. And Bonsai has this way of taking the trilogs, which is each account diff that takes place in a block. Those are all stored, and Bonsai has this concept of, well, replay those backwards to get to a given version of a trinode in the database, and then we've got a state tree at a given historic block. And the whole premise of doing this state proof work is that we already have that. That's already part of Bonsai, to go back 100 blocks for a layer 2 to be able to kind of get a proof for inclusion. But for archive, for financial instruments on public Ethereum who want to archive, to audit state anywhere back on the history of the chain, or for enterprises who obviously have that requirement, it's not possible to replay all those logs for millions and millions of blocks to get to a given version of the state tree. So the approach I've used for the archive state proofs is that every n blocks of updates to the state tree, we do keep a hard copy of the node at that point in time. So all the gray blocks here are state tree nodes that don't exist in the database, and the colorful ones are ones that do exist. And that means that if you're at block 10 million and you need to recreate the state tree for block, let's call it 4, 4 at the top of this, then what we can do is we can leap all the way back to the closest real node in the database that represents a node in the state tree closer to block number 4, and then do the traditional trilog rolling to go back from that block to block 4. So that allows you to basically do what we do today for the chain head, but leap back millions of blocks almost instantly, and generate a state tree for block 4 that's accurate. And then using that state tree in memory, we can generate a proof for any of the accounts, any of the storage. I'm going to skip through some of this. One lower level down in terms of implementation is that this is how keys are stored in the database to kind of achieve that. So the ABC 1, 2, 3 in this chart is the path to an entry in the state tree. So that stays the same as in Bonsai. That stays the same as the state tree nodes are changed, and then the suffix in the database for the key includes the block that the checkpoint is being taken at. So this is every 50 blocks. As the state changes, we persist just one entry, and we keep updating that entry until we get to that checkpoint block 50, and then we store that one and we start updating a new entry for block 100. And when we get to block 100, we start a new one, and so on. So we store a small subset of the actual nodes in the database. And so this is what you see on disk if you go and look at what the database looks like as you go through the blocks. I'm going to skip through some stuff here, and I'm happy to make all these available. And
I think I'm missing something here, Matt.
Sure.
So how would you reproduce the state between? So these look like kind of like checkpoints to me, right?
Yes, effectively, yeah.
Okay, but you don't have all of the intermediate states between the checkpoints, right? Because if you did, you wouldn't actually
No.
save any space.
Exactly, yeah.
So
Yeah.
So how do you go backwards? Or are you replaying the blocks forward? Like how are you, I guess that's what I'm wondering is like, how do you actually roll the state backwards over interblock states that you're missing?
Yeah, so the short answer is we still store all of the trilogs.
Oh,
So if we have the state tree node for a specific block at a checkpoint in time, and I can talk to this quick example. If we have that in the database, then we can say, right, we have that, and now we can go and get the try logs that take us from that back a few more blocks to a state tree node that doesn't exist,
I see.
and we can
So
recreate it.
you have a fully hydrated tree at each of those colored blocks.
Yes, that's pretty much it. Yeah, each of the color blocks is a full tree. That's kind of a way of looking at it.
Yeah, okay.
Um, and the gray ones don't exist but are recreatable.
Got it. All right, cool,
Um,
thanks.
yeah. So what I've done, I'm not going to go through these now, but they are here partly as a like a reference for how the implementation currently works, but partly to explain some of these kind of what happens in the code in a bit more detail. And what you end up with is you kind of have the chain head state. In this case, is like block 390. As you go through this process, you can effectively start with the chain head state every time because it's got everything you need, and you can just start asserting things about where you are in the tree, and that affects really then where you just start reading from in the database. So what you end up with is you kind of end up with this picture here where after you've done the trilog rolling, these little green nodes have been produced in memory by doing that process we described. You've still got all of this other state, like you've still got all the state for block 390, which is the current chain head. But what you've done is you've produced a state tree for the target block. Um, and with that in memory, you can then generate your proofs. Um, in terms of what actually is working to date, so there's not a draft PR yet, but it's pretty close to being in a draft PR. But I'm skip over all these. In terms of storage, I thought it's useful to say why are we bothering with all this. So Forest had full state proofs as an archive feature already, and so we moved to Bonsai, and so it feels like a lot of effort to get back to where we were. But actually, a really useful data point is this example where I just created a chain up to 15,000 blocks at about 10 transactions a second using the state proof function we just talked through. The green line is the amount of storage Forest DB used at block 15,000. So that's like 240 megs. And then all the other ones, the bottom blue one is Bonsai without state proofs. And the orange and red ones are Bonsai with full state proofs configured in two different ways, basically configured with checkpoint intervals at different periods in time. So you can see that the benefit of this approach with Bonsai gives you a dramatic space saving compared to ForestDB for a totally equivalent function. I'm not aware of any function difference between the orange, red, and green lines in this chart. So I think that helps kind of explain why it's worth going to all this effort. And obviously, we have a lot of enterprises who want the ability, from an audit point of view, to get state proofs for state, not just trust the state that they're told by the JSON RPC endpoint. And then I guess lastly, it's kind of useful to show, it's kind of nice to see stuff running. So this is a node that's syncing with mainnet currently. I just started it yesterday, maybe 2 days ago. Yeah, 2 days ago. And so it's up to block 2 million importing, and there's a separate metric for kind of the archive stuff. So this node is importing blocks from mainnet, doing a full sync in state proof mode, and it's kind of trucking along slowly, but it's working, and there are no kind of state tree issues. And hopefully this is big enough to see. In order to test that, actually, if we're archiving mainnet, that we've got accurate ability to generate accurate state trees at any point in history. I've just got these couple of scripts which have a bunch of standard JSON RPC calls for like getting account information, like transaction counts and things at specific interesting blocks. So there are some blocks where nonces change several times in a block and so on. And also the same for proof. So I have some this is kind of a pretty hokey kind of script, but basically it goes and gets some proofs for different blocks and checks they're what you expect. And that just means that I can make changes, resync, and I can you can ignore the error. That's just where we've run it. We're not at the block for that account yet, but I can just run this, and it gives a nice little warm feeling that the actual archiving is correct up to the block we've got to so far. And the same for the validate proof stuff. So that's where it's at functionally in terms of testing and usability. And the time to generate the proofs is the other interesting thing. It's not particularly longer than Forest. It's probably I can run the validate proof script, which does a whole bunch of ETH proof calls. Yeah, it's just made a whole bunch of them for random historic blocks. And it took like a second to do those. So it's easily sub-second to do ETH proof for historic blocks. Of the order of probably like a tenth of a second or something. So it's not a feature that needs incredible performance, but I don't think people are crying out for the ability to generate proofs very, very rapidly. But it's worth just checking that performance isn't totally horrendous. Okay, I think that is that side of things done as well. Any questions on that side of things? So the aim in timings is to get that into a PR in the next few weeks, and it'll probably take quite a few iterations of reviews and stuff because the code's kind of picky and it needs to be right and so on. Okay,
Cool.
happy for me to move on, Justin?
No, that all makes sense. You want to move on to the deprecation work?
Yeah, sure. So Barney, I guess I'll hand over to you on this in a sec as well. What in this on this side of things, I did have the sunset blog. So you'll be aware that we've sunset the features in Besu, the Tesla privacy stuff, some contract-based permissioning, proof of work, and fast sync. And we're at the time that this blog was published in September, and the timelines given were kind of around 6 to 7 months. They're actually going to be removed. So again, what we wanted in Collider is just kind of help the community with that process. It helps with the kind of modularity side of things in that we're slimming down the code base. We're removing stuff that hopefully makes development of things a bit quicker and easier. So I guess to summarize, I think the smart contract based permissioning, I think Sally may already have removed. But the test for privacy is something that we have started pulling out. So that's a big draft PR that I've been testing with enterprise chains. And again, if I go to here, so Sally took my branch and has been syncing with mainnet to check that ripping out 300 odd files from Besu's code base hasn't had any inadvertent side effects, and her testing's looking pretty good as well. So I think once we're happy that we haven't regressed any obvious behavior by pulling out all of this Tesla and privacy related function, then I think that'll go into review to be removed shortly. On the proof of work and fast sync side of things, I'll stop sharing now. But Banu, I know you're running with removing those items.
Yes. Yeah. So I've been working on removing fast sync feature. Yeah, I've mostly cleaned up fast sync specific classes, but there are a few that snap sync and checkpoint sync use. So let them the code base. The tests look fine so far. All the tests run fine. So I'll share more details on Discord about that. Probably raise a draft PR and share them.
Cool.
Our proof of work is in progress.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and yeah, Banu and I talked about the fact that snap sync kind of was an evolution of fast syncing the classes in Besu a little bit. So there's a bit of maybe class refactoring involved there, rather than just the simplicity of pulling out some flags and some stuff that's just doing fast sync things. But I think what we'll do is get draft PRs ready for all of that. We'll maybe give it to the end of March, just before we kind of start actively removing them from main. But it's obviously then going to be another few weeks till there's a release that removes them, just to make sure people have had that 6 or 7 month notice period.
One thing we could do, and it's optional. Sorry to interrupt. I didn't use the raise hand. I'm driving,
No
so I
worries.
didn't have a free hand. But one thing we could do, and again, it's optional, but if we want to just communicate when that change happens, when the release comes, when all this deprecation work is completed, we could basically almost maybe talk to Emily about rerunning that previous blog post. Because like you said, it's been several months now. We could put that out there and just to let people know that changes happen. And we could point to resources like last year's Besu plugin workshop about, hey, if you're looking for, adding any of these features back in here, go check out this plugin information, right? So, I mean, that's something, if we want, we could talk to Emily about doing something just to announce it.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, just to remind people. And all of the releases since about December, they've all had in their release notes a little reminder that all of this stuff's going away. So that's been kind of a useful reminder to people as they've picked up the last 3 or 4 releases that this is coming. But yeah, I think that's a good idea, David.
Okay. I mean, if you don't mind, I can start a thread with, I guess, you, me, and Emily, and just
Sure.
to see what her thoughts are.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
One thing we need to consider before doing that, though, engaging with them, is that the things that are being removed may not have one-to-one parity with a potential replacement via the plugin API. So that's a thing that we probably need to be a little bit more clear on before we encourage people to go and start trying to develop a thing. We want it to get there, right? So I think the worst case situation is they find like, oh, this thing is missing. They come back to us and we add it. I think that even that is a win, but it is something that we kind of need to be prepared for.
All right.
Totally agree, Justin. And actually, starting to pull the QBFT stuff out, the first thing I did after having a little play around was raise a core plugin API PR to start adding bits in that it was clear we were going to need. So I think if we start to see the plugin API grow more, I think that's going to be excellent.
Great.
Okay, so then I think that covers those items on that we added to the agenda. There was one other just general enterprise stuff, and again, I guess Banu, I'll get you to just chip in here. The 2 sub-bullets I'll do the other way around. So just generally, history expiry is something we're looking at because there is an undocumented kind of experimental feature for chain pruning and removing old blocks. Obviously, there's a lot of talk around that for public Ethereum and the Era 1 files and Portal Network and all that kind of goodness. But enterprise chains, we're just looking at what it means for enterprise chains. And I think what we'd like to get to is the currently undocumented chain pruning feature where you can remove old blocks if you want to save storage and maybe run one really big fat archive node with all the goodness we've just shown a few minutes ago, and some really light nodes that don't even have old blocks. They've just got enough state to keep with the head of the chain. I think we'd like those history expiry features that around chain pruning to be kind of a bit more tested, documented, and one of the things we've hit in testing them is they don't behave quite how we think our enterprise users would want them to behave. You don't get actual file system storage freed up at the same rate that you're pruning the chain for reasons that relate to RocksDB configurations. So that's an area that Barney is also looking at when he's not ripping out FastSync and proof of work. Anything to add there, Barney?
Yeah. No, that's all sounds good. But yeah, there's definitely scope of fine-tuning or adding more config to RocksDB if needed. Yeah, but don't have more details on that.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. And then finally, the other item around just general enterprise stuff is stuff Barney has led, and we've had his PR merged on that recently, which is just to help users of old Quorum IBFT chains move to Besu QBFT. Barney, do you want to give us just a couple of minutes on what you've done there?
Sure. Yeah, let me check that.
Cool.
Sorry, can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were exploring options to migrate from different consensus to QBFT, and yeah, after making changes, we're doing that from Quorum IBFT1 to Besu QBFT. Finally, we ended up in a state where all of these transitions work. So, yeah, this Quorum IBFT1 to Besu QBFT is more like stop mining and migrate and start with QBFT kind of transition. Besu IBFT2 to Besu QBFT also works based on my testing at Istanbul, but I don't have enough test cases in the code base to be pretty sure about that. But it is at least in a functioning state.
Cool.
Yep, that's like a short update on that. Do you have any questions?
So I guess for background, this has involved a little bit of reinstating some code that was removed from Besu a while back, because Besu obviously didn't want to support what it called IBFT legacy, and it just involved reinstating enough of that, basically read-only IBFT legacy. So you can't produce new IBFT1 blocks with since the PR, but it can understand and decode them. And that was really the enough work to then be able to move users and use a QBFT transition in the Genesis to then carry on with QBFT blocks from wherever your chain head was. Cool. Thanks, Barney. And thank you, Justin. Rose, we've taken up quite a lot of the call today. Thank you. I think that's us done.
It's all good. Appreciate it. It's a lot of good info. Good to know. We'll try and get some feedback on that last one as soon as possible through Discord. I missed. Are you waiting on a PR for that? I missed that part.
No,
it's
that's
March.
Okay. Cool. All right. Next up on the agenda, it looks like we have some infrastructure notes. I don't know if David or Hart or who wants to field
I
that
can
one.
cover it if you want.
Great.
So this is the result of a conversation that among Consensus and Hart and other folks on my team. There was a request to, as you can see in the first, item, the request was to use Docusaurus and Vercel instead of GitHub pages for documentation. And the feeling was that using GitHub pages was a requirement. And that was, if that is how it was read, I apologize. using GitHub Pages is a preference, not a requirement. So if Besu wants to use Docosaurus and Vercel, just work with me to make that happen. Is anyone on the call, do they have any strong feelings about Docosaurus and Vercel over GitHub Pages?
I think it's great. I just want to clarify here that this is specifically for end user documentation. So that, yeah, that already exists in Docusaurus. There is our documentation team wants to migrate to Vercel. Yeah, so other than that, I think that makes total sense.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Somehow the preference that this is served from GitHub Pages got turned into a hard requirement, and that was never my intention.
Okay.
Other feedback was on reducing noise in Discord and wanting to separate the the questions on mainnet from the permission stuff. And this was our proposal as staff, was to basically do this: create 2 new channels and direct people appropriately. A long time ago, we had a Besu newbies channel, like the other projects have. It was requested that that channel go away and people should just ask in Besu. But that's kind of led to some static over in Besu, people asking, questions about the enterprise case versus the mainnet case. So our proposal is 2 new channels.
Okay.
Thoughts?
Right. So we got some feedback from folks on there, and I think this is pretty good. So we already have a Besu Enterprise channel that we regularly direct folks to when they have questions for anything that's not mainnet. And I feel like that's working out pretty well. Matthew and Banu, you probably on the receiving end of most of that. Is that working out good enough for you?
Yeah, I think it works relatively well. There was an example the other day of someone asking kind of Q50 stuff, and Sally, I think, pointed them at the enterprise channel, and we kind of moved the
Yeah.
conversation across. That kind of happens from time to time, but it does generally get pretty well used. It's not like tumbleweeds there, and everyone's just still asking in the main channels. So I think it works okay for us.
Okay,
Right.
so then it would be leave the current channels as they are? Question
I
mark.
yes, I think so. So I think we want to leave Besu Enterprise as it is. I guess the next question is, do we want to sharpen the Besu channel to be something that's a little more specific than just Besu? And so, one of the proposals would be like, okay, just rename it Besu Mainnet. Somebody on our team said, well, that's might be a little bit confusing to new users. Like if they're just going to Besu, they probably are having mainnet questions. So I think the TLDR here is this isn't a terribly big issue. And if anything, we might ask to rename one of the channels, but I don't think we need to introduce question-specific channels. I think
Okay.
that's so I think we're in an okay place here.
Okay, and just to be like super duper crisp here,
Yeah,
you all have the permission to manage channels in the Besu space. So if you want to create a new public channel, you can just create it. You can just do it. You don't have to ask me or anything.
that is fantastic. I did not know that.
Yeah, anyone. So there are a bunch of roles. Anyone that has the project maintainer role has the ability to do some basic channel management, like reporting spammers and banning them and stuff. And then I guess I will stop sharing this, and I will go over here to LFDT and share that window. Da-da-da-da-da.
Okay, yeah, I see that I have the project maintainer role, and I have banned people before, so this.
Right. So if I go to the Besu here and I go to edit category, you will see that everyone has stock stuff, but the Besu maintainer person, if you have that role, you have the ability to manage channels, webhooks, and messages, which basically means ban and delete people. And then the project maintainer role also has stuff above that. So within the Besu, within this group, anyone that has the Besu maintainer role has the ability to create and manage channels.
Great.
And then lastly, the community calls, that's kind of what we're doing today. The automatic posting to YouTube is under development, and I was actually just talking with our developer about that yesterday. What I will commit to doing is when calls over here end, I will, number one, get the shareable link out of PCC and post it, and then I will do the download and shuffle it over to YouTube and put it in the proper playlist. But that is a feature that is supposedly coming soon, but I will commit that I will do that manually.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, if you could just share the location of the correct playlist in maybe the Besu channel, that'll be great. And then we can just keep an eye on that. Because I think one of the things that we've ran into in the past is we're unclear as to where those videos actually end up. So
Yeah. I can't spell. Yeah, so it'll be this contributor call.
Okay.
So I will share that link.
Rad.
And then the last thing is the wiki migration. Basically, we LF are just kind of willing to punt on this for like another couple quarters.
Okay.
But at some point, the goal is that the wiki that I'm using right now is going to become more of a read-only thing, and then projects, if they want a wiki, should use the GitHub wiki or something of that nature. But that is just an advisory notice that's going on. Why? Because it's yet another thing to manage where people are asking questions about why does the wiki work this way, and it's just yet another piece of infrastructure to manage, and it's a little bit difficult to keep everything in sync. If it's all on GitHub, managing the wiki is much easier.
Yeah, so I think one of our major concerns with that is that we have a lot of content in the wiki, and we don't want to direct users to have to go to potentially two different places, not knowing which of the two places they're going to need to go to. So, if we do migrate to something new, we need a path to get that existing content out of the current wiki and into whatever the new thing is. That's going to
Yeah.
be It's going to be pretty important to us.
Yeah, and this is something that I did at some point. So there is a repo over here, which is wiki, which is an export that I did of the content at a certain point in time. I'm going to say about 5 months ago.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if this is still public. Yeah, so this is just a straight export. It's not that hard to do a markdown export and get this all in markdown and move it over there. This is not something that needs to happen like this month or next month. This is something we can revisit towards the end of the year. But
Sure, yeah. I think our concern is like making sure that it's as usable once it gets to the new place as it is currently now. So like a folder full of HTML or Markdown is not as usable as all the wiki tooling that sits on top of it.
oh
So
yeah. So let me go here quickly to David, do you recall where the wiki lives over here? Yeah, okay.
Got it.
Yeah. So this is our standard. This is the standard GitHub wiki, and it doesn't have every single tool, but it has a lot of the tools. So to be able to edit the wiki, you just need to decide who can edit the wiki. You know, it's usually a maintainer or something of that nature.
Right. So I guess what we need to have is a way to import the raw content into this, pages interface and have everything, all the links preserved and everything like that.
So yeah, like I said, like this is just more advisory. This is not something that's going to happen in the next, couple quarters. So
Yeah, so I
that
would say keep using the wiki as is for now, and then yeah, we'll help you migrate it and export stuff, as Rai said, in a few months. So no
So
change on your part for now.
that's great. When is the existing wiki going to go read only?
We're a little vague on this just because we're sequencing things, so we don't have an exact time frame. We're dealing with some other infrastructure changes first, so we've kind of put the wiki at the end of the list. We're dealing with some other issues, specifically GitHub changes right now that has a higher priority. So it's really just a matter of when we get to these other things being resolved that we'll move to the wiki. So we're estimating like Q3, but we don't have an exact date.
Okay. Good enough.
okay. Do you have
And
any?
then, sorry, I may have missed it, but Justin, but for going back to the documentation stuff, did you have a name that we should coordinate with? You mentioned the documentation team, but is there like a specific person we should reach out to, or what's the next step?
If you're referring to the Docusaurus and Versal work,
Yeah.
I believe that conversation I believe there's a Besu Docs channel.
Okay, just post in that channel then.
No, there isn't. That's surprising. Well, I will use my newly discovered power to create a Besu Docs channel, and I will send the relevant staff members to go check it out, and we can have that conversation there.
Okay, perfect. Great. Thanks for giving us the place to have that conversation.
Yeah, no problem.
Great.
Hart, I see your hand is up, buddy.
I do. Yeah, thanks. Just one last thing on the infrastructure stuff. I know people were not happy with the charter, and it was requested that we redraft a minimalistic charter that points as much governance as possible to maintainers.md.
Uh-huh.
Should I tell the lawyers to write that?
I don't see why not.
Okay. I
I
will.
think about that. Yeah, I don't really see why not. I think that's a good next action.
All right. We'll do that then.
Thank you, Hart.
Of course.
Cool. Anybody else? We got 10 minutes left. Does anybody want to bring anything else up? I had a big productive meeting today. Go ahead, Hart.
Have you posted your random question? Have you posted your ETH Denver slides publicly?
Oh, the slides themselves.
Yes.
I don't think so.
I would love, if you're okay with it, I would love to reuse them.
Sure. Let me take a look at it just to make sure. I am an avid user of notes, so I want to make sure that the notes that I have in there are relevant and publicly digestible. But other than that, yeah, I don't see any reason why we couldn't publish that.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
All right, I'll put that on my to-do list. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to create a documentation channel and kick off the conversation about Docusaurus and Versal in there.
Sounds good. And it's not instant, but as soon as this recording shows up and is available, I'll download it and put it in the playlist, which I linked in the Discord channel.
Awesome. Thank you, Rai. That is,
Mhm.
our Australian friends look forward to watching that video the day after these calls. So that's great.
Cool.
All right. With that, if nobody has anything else, we can we can wrap this up. Kaleido, thank you so much. You guys really shouldered the burden today. A lot of good work there. Appreciate it.
No problem. No, happy to be involved.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, all.
On the internet.